But when he found that he had come to the conviction that the letter was not to be found, he flew for a third time into such a rage as was near costing him a fresh consumption of wine, oil, and rosemary, for upon seeing this hot-headed youth become exasperated and threaten to destroy everything in the establishment if his letter were not found, the host seized a spit, and his wife a broom handle, and the servants the same sticks that they had used the day before. "My letter of recommendation!" cried D'Artagnan. "My letter of recommendation, or by holy blood I will spit you out like ortolans." Unfortunately, there was one circumstance which created a powerful obstacle to the accomplishment of this threat, which was, as we have related, that his sword had been in the first conflict broken in two, and of which he had entirely forgotten. Hence it resulted, when D'Artagnan proceeded to draw his sword in earnest, he found himself purely and simply armed with a stump of a sword of about 8 or 10 inches in length, which the host had carefully placed in its scabbard. As to the rest of the blade, the master had slyly put it on one side to make himself a larding pin. But this deception would probably not have stopped our fiery young man if the host had not reflected that the reclamation which his guest made was perfectly just. "But, after all," said he, lowering the point of his spit, "where is this letter?" "Yes, where is the letter?" cried D'Artagnan. "In the first place, I warn you that the letter is for Monsieur de Tréville, and it must be found. He will know how to find it." His threat completed the intimidation of the host. After the king and the cardinal, Monsieur de Tréville was the man whose name was perhaps most frequently repeated by the military and even by the citizens. There was, to be sure, Father Joseph, but his name was never pronounced but with a subdued voice. Such was the terror inspired by his Grey Eminence, as the cardinal's familiar was called. Throwing down his spit and ordering his wife to do the same with her broom handle, and the servants with their sticks, he set the first example of commencing an earnest search for the lost letter. "Does the letter contain anything valuable?" demanded the host, after a few minutes of useless investigation. "Zounds, I think it does indeed," cried the Gascon, who reckoned upon this letter making his way to the court. "It contained my fortune." "Bills upon Spain?" asked the disturbed host. "Bills upon his Majesty's private treasury," answered D'Artagnan, who, reckoning upon entering into the king's service in consequence of this recommendation, believed he could make this somewhat haphazard reply without telling of a falsehood. "The devil!" cried the host, at his wits' end. "But it's of no importance," continued D'Artagnan with natural assurance. "It's of no importance. The money is nothing. The letter was everything. I would have rather lost 1,000 pistols than to have lost it." He would not have risked more if he had said 20,000, but a certain juvenile modesty restrained him. A ray of light all at once broke upon the mind of the host as he was giving himself to the devil upon finding nothing. "The letter is not lost!" cried he. "What?" cried D'Artagnan. "No, it has been stolen from you." "Stolen? By whom?" "The gentleman who was here yesterday. He came down into the kitchen, where your doublet was, and he remained there some time alone. I would lay a wager that he has stolen it." "Do you think so?" answered D'Artagnan, but little convinced, as he knew better than anyone else how entirely personal the value of the letter was, and was nothing in it likely to tempt cupidity. The fact was, none of his servants, none of the travelers present, could have gained anything to be possessed by this paper. "Do you say," resumed D'Artagnan, "that you suspect that impertinent gentleman?" "I tell you I am sure of it," continued the host. "When I informed him that your lordship was the protégé of Monsieur de Tréville, and that you even had a letter for that illustrious gentleman, he appeared to be very much disturbed, and asked me where the letter was, and immediately came down into the kitchen, where he knew your doublet was." "Then that's my thief," replied D'Artagnan. "I will complain to Monsieur de Tréville, and Monsieur de Tréville will complain to the king." And then he drew 2 crowns majestically from his purse, and gave them to the host, who accompanied him hat in hand to the gate, and remounted his yellow horse, which bore him without any further accident to the gate of Saint Antoine, at Paris, where he sold him for 3 crowns, which was a very good price, considering that D'Artagnan had ridden him hard during the last stage. Thus the dealer to whom D'Artagnan sold him for 9 livres could not conceal from the young man that he only gave that enormous sum to him on account of the originality of his color. Thus D'Artagnan entered Paris on foot, carrying his little packet under his arm, and walking about till he found an apartment to be let on terms that suited to the scantness of his means. The chamber was a sort of garret, situated on the Rue des Fossoyeurs, near Luxembourg. As soon as the earnest money was paid, D'Artagnan took possession of his lodging, and passed the remainder of the day sewing into his doublet and hose some ornamental braiding which his mother had taken off of an almost new doublet of the elder Monsieur d'Artagnan, and which she had given to her son secretly. Next he went to the Quai de Ferraille to have a new blade put onto his sword, and then returned toward the Louvre, inquiring of the first musketeer he met for the situation of the hotel of Monsieur de Treville, which proved to be in the Rue du Vaux Colombier, that is to say, in the immediate vicinity of that chamber hired by D'Artagnan, a circumstance which appeared to furnish a happy augury for the success of his journey. After this, satisfied with the way in which he conducted himself at Meung, without remorse for the past, confident in the present, and full of hope for the future, he retired to bed and slept the sleep of the brave. This sleep, provincial as it was, brought him to 9 o'clock in the morning, at which hour he rose, in order to repair to the residence of Monsieur de Treville, the 3rd personage in the kingdom in the paternal estimation.